Assalamualaikum and hi, my name is Nurul Atikah Binti Azizul. In this presentation video, I'll be sharing about instruments of trade policy and government intervention in free trade, which is how China used trade policy instruments such as tariff, quota, subsidies, and examine how government intervention influence free trade within that country. This analysis will explore the impact of this instrument on trade relationship, economic growth, and adherence to international trade agreements. Let's start with a quick overview of China. Today, China is one of the world's largest trading nations and plays a major role in the global trading system. Since the economic reform at the end of the 20th century, trade has become a key part of China's economy. After joining the World Trade Organization, which is WTO in 2001, China saw rapid growth in both imports and exports. China mainly imports advanced technology, raw materials, and agricultural products. On the other hand, it exports a wide range of manufactured goods such as machinery, electronics, textile, and vehicles. Some of its biggest trading partners including the US, Japan, and South Korea, and countries in the European Union. To support its economic growth, China has built strong international trade relationships and signed free trade agreements with several nations. This shows how deeply China is involved in global trade, influencing supply chains, pricing, and economic development around the world. Now, looking at China's trade policy stand, it's considered relatively open but with a unique approach. While China supports global trade, it also uses specific policy tools to protect and promote its domestic industry. Over time, the country's trade system has shifted from being tightly controlled to more transparent. However, the government still plays a major role in managing what comes in and goes out of the country. For example, China has introduced import restrictions and tariffs to shield industries like steel and agriculture. It also uses export controls on strategic resources such as rare earth elements to maintain its competitive edge. Additionally, the government provides subsidies to industries like semiconductors and electric vehicles to help them compete on a global scale. China also relies on state-owned enterprise, which is SOEs, to dominate key sectors like telecommunication and energy. While these strategies have helped China grow in certain areas, they often lead to tension to other trading partners, who argue that such actions go against the principle of free trade. So depending the industry and national goals, China trade policy can be seen as both open and protective, balancing global engagement with strong government involvement. Next is analysis of China's trade policy instrument. China's use of trade policy, which is tariff, subsidies, non-tariff barrier, and export control, shows a mix of defensive and strategic thinking. Each tool has short-term gains and long-term risks, and they all affect not just China but the global trade landscape as well. Okay, firstly is tariff. During the height of US-China trade war, China frequently used tariff as a defensive and retaliatory tool. When the US imposed high tariff on Chinese goods, citing issues like intellectual property theft and trade imbalance, China responded by placing its own tariff on American products such as soybeans, vehicles, and machinery. These tariffs serve multiple purposes: to protect what China saw as unfair trade pressure, to protect its domestic industry, and to reduce reliance on import from the US. By doing so, China hoped to encourage local alternatives and apply pressure on key US sectors like agriculture, possibly influencing political decision. In practice, the results were mixed. Some Chinese farmers and producers temporarily benefit, but Chinese consumers face higher price on import goods like food and tech. Industries that rely on US import for manufacturing were also hit hard, experiencing disruptions and rising costs. So while some sectors gained, others suffered, and the overall trade balance become unstable. Okay, next we look at subsidies, which is especially in sectors that China considers strategic. A great example is in the rare earth industry. Rare earth elements or RAEs are vital in producing things like electric vehicles, solar panels, and even military tech. China has heavily supported this industry through state investment and financial aid. As a result, it currently controls over 60% of global rare earth supply and exporter, which is earning over $10 billion from rare earth export in 2022 alone. These subsidies have boosted China's trade supplies and given it leverage in global markets. However, the dominance has raised concern over environmental damage due to the harmful mining practices involved. In response, China has introduced stricter environmental rules and green subsidies to reduce the negative impact. Third is non-tariff barrier. These are hidden or informal restrictions that can affect trade without being officially announced. In China's case, they include things like lengthy inspection, delays in custom, rejection of product certificate, or sudden regulation changes. China often uses NTBs to quietly pressure foreign companies without openly violating trade rules. This helps protecting domestic business and strengthen China's bargaining position during trade talks. However, these tactics have made it difficult for some international firms to operate in China. For example, products like American cherries were once held up at customs long enough to spoil. These kinds of practice protect local producers but also hurt China's reputation as a reliable trading partner. As a result, there have been louder calls from the global community for China to comply with fair trade rules, especially under the WTO. Okay, the last one is export controls. In mid-2023, China restricted export of two key metals, which is germanium and gallium, which are essential for making solar panels, semiconductors, electric vehicles, and military tech. Although China claimed this move were made for national security reasons, many saw it as a response to Western restriction on China's access to high-tech equipment. Since China dominates the global supply of this material, it sent a clear signal which is China is willing to use its control over key resources as a bargaining tool in global trade. This strategy had big ripple effects. Prices for these metals surged, and countries depending on China start looking elsewhere, for example to Canada, Australia, and parts of Africa. While China may lose some short-term export revenue, the government likely sees this as a trade-off for gaining long-term geopolitical power. It could also push local innovation and new investment in rare metal processing. However, this approach also risks retaliation from affected countries who may create their own restriction or invest in alternative supply chains. In the long run, this could reduce China's dominance and impact its trade balance. It also cause global market instability, inflationary pressure, and potential reputational harm. Okay, next is impact of government intervention in trade. First, we look for the government motive for intervention. Let's start with why the Chinese government gets involved in trade and industry. One of the main goals is to shift China away from being just the world factory and towards becoming a high-tech, innovation-driven economy. This vision is clearly outlined in the Made in China 2025 plan, launched in 2015. It's a 10-year strategy aimed at boosting China's capabilities in advanced industries like robotics, aerospace, AI, biotechnology, semiconductors, and electric vehicles. To make this happen, the government channels resources like subsidies, policy support, and investment incentives into a core strategic sector. This reflects China's state capitalist approach, where the government plays a major role in driving economic and industrial growth to achieve long-term national and security goals. Another reason behind this push is China's concern about relying too much on foreign high-tech suppliers, especially from the countries like US. The Chinese government wants to reduce its vulnerability to external economic and political pressure by building self-sufficiency in critical supply chains, especially as global tension rises. The trade war with the US and increasing Western tech restrictions have only strengthened the China belief that state-led intervention is essential, not just for growth, but also for maintaining competitiveness and influence in the global system. Next is effect of government intervention. While the goals of MIC 2035 may seem understandable from a national development point of view, the way China is going about it has caused serious concern among its trade partners. Countries like US and members of EU see China's heavy protection and support for domestic industries as a form of state-led protectionism. From a free trade perspective, China's approach challenges key principles of the WTO like fairness, openness, and equal treatment. With strong government support, Chinese companies are able to export high-tech products at artificially low prices, undercutting competitors from open market economies that don't receive the same help. This has affected several global industries like solar panels, metals, and telecommunication. Where Chinese exports have flooded markets. As a result, many countries have responded with anti-dumping duties, tariff, and other defensive measures. The MIC 2025 strategy has also deepened trade tension, especially with the US, which sees it as a direct threat to tech leadership. In response, the US has imposed tariff, export restriction, and investment bans targeting Chinese tech firms. This has contributed to broader technological and trade decoupling between China and the West. The ripple effect to this intervention are clear, which is firstly an increase in trade dispute and WTO complaints. Second, a global push to diversify supply chains away from China. Third is rising concern about the stability of the global trading system. So in short, while China's interventionist trade policies have supported its domestic industries and technological ambitions, they have also created friction in international markets, sparked retaliation, and raised long-term concern about fair competition and global economic stability. Excessive state support is often seen by other countries as a market distorting and politically damaging, which could eventually hurt China's global trade relationship. Okay, proceed with implication of China's trade policy with free trade principle. China's impressive economic rise and progress in high-tech innovation can be closely linked to its use of several trade policy tools like I have explained before. However, these strategies have also raised growing concerns about their long-term effect, especially when it comes to how well they align with global trade rules, maintain trust in international partnerships, and follow the principle of free trade. Some WTO members have criticized China for continuing to favor domestic producers over fair market competition. Issues like lack of transparency in subsidies, the dominance of SOEs, and unclear rules in certain sectors like digital trade and services have led to doubts about China's commitment to WTO principle. This principle openness, fair competition, and non-discrimination are crucial for smooth global trade cooperation. The impact of these trade rules have been mixed. On positive side, China has become a major trade partner for over 130 countries, helping emerging economies access new markets and giving consumers around the world more affordable goods. On the negative side, concern about forced technology transfer, overproduction, and market manipulation have led to trade disputes, especially with the US and EU. This tension have resulted in retaliatory tariff, ongoing WTO complaints, and growing effort from other countries to diversify their supply chains away from China. From an economic development point of view, China industrial strategies and subsidies have boosted innovation, create jobs, and helped the country move up the global value chain, particularly in sectors like technology, communication, and renewable energy. However, relying too heavily on government support can backfire. It risks creating inefficiency, weakening business competitiveness, and misguiding investment decisions. Over time, this could threaten the long stability of China's own economy. It's also worth noting that while China has made some positive moves within the WTO framework, such as opening certain service sectors and reducing some tariffs, many WTO members still highlight gaps. This include lack of progress in areas like licensing, subsidy transparency, and enforcement of intellectual property rights. Unless China improves in this area, it could face more pressure from trading partners, including legal actions and tighter restrictions. Next part is recommendation for policy improvement or alignment with free trade principle. China's entry into the global trading system played a key role in turning it into a global economic powerhouse. But to maintain and accelerate that growth, China needs to further align its trade policy with free trade principle. This means addressing current challenges and making improvements that promote transparency, fairness, and global trust. First, China should make sure that its all trade policies are clear, fair, and fully consistent with international trade rules, especially those of the WTO. Before any new trade rules are introduced, there should be compliance checks to make sure they meet WTO standards. This would show that China is committed to global trade norms and help ensure that its trade system is open, non-discriminatory, and efficient. A transparent system will attract more global business and improve how resources are used across industries. Second, while China has improved its law to better protect intellectual property, there are still gaps in enforcement. International investors, especially in the tech and pharmaceutical sectors, often point out weak IP protection as a major concern. China should ensure that local and foreign business are treated equally in court, strengthen enforcement of IP law, and apply real consequences for violation. This will encourage innovation, attract more international investment, and improve trust in China's trade system. Lastly, China should work on reducing restrictive regulation and promoting fair competition between local and foreign companies. Although progress has been made, some protective trade practices still limit competition and affect both trade relationship and consumer welfare. Fixing this issue will boost domestic market efficiency and help improve China's global trade partnership. So in conclusion, China has used a variety of trade policy tools such as export control, non-tariff barriers, subsidies, and tariff to support its domestic industry and achieve key national goals. These measures have helped China boost export and become a powerful player in the global economy. However, while these strategies have supported domestic innovation and growth, they also lead to rising tension with major trade partners. Countries like EU and US have raised concerns, saying China's trade practices violate WTO rules and create unfair competition. As a result, we've seen more trade conflict, retaliatory tariff, and international pressure on China to improve transparency and level the playing field. In the long run, if not carefully managed, these aggressive trade tactics could hurt global trade relations and trust. For China to continue on sustainable economic path, it will need to find the right balance between protecting its domestic interests and cooperating with global trade partners. Okay, that's all from me. Thank you.